Hi, it's Steph, and we're at the Home Depot, and they've received a shipment of some beautiful plants for fall. Some sedum, some grasses, some shrubs, and the mums have even arrived. So let's go ahead and take a look at the August inventory at the Home Depot. The first thing that caught my eye today was this beautiful plant here. Now this looks like the Echibeckia Rudbeckia that I grow in my garden from seed. They are known as an annual here in my zone 6B7A. However, some of the plants did return for me. But this is not the Echibeckia Rudbeckia. This is called an Echibeckia summerina. So this is a cross between an echinacea and a Rudbeckia. And it looks very similar to that Sahara. Has these gorgeous sunset colors. They do like full sun, and this one is listed as a perennial. Let's see what zones they're hardy in. It looks like they're hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. They get to be 20 to 24 inches in height and need 18 to 24 inch spacing. They bloom early summer to mid-fall. They are gorgeous. Look at this. Such pretty colors. And these are in the Home Depot colored pots. They're listed as a number 2 for $14.98. This is an interesting ground cover that I added to my garden about 2 seasons ago now. It is a perennial, so it comes back every year, and this is called Plumbago. And what I like about it is that it has this nice green foliage. It looks almost like a chartreuse color. And then it will get these dainty little blue blooms that are really pretty all over the plant. And as the temperatures start to cool off and we head into fall, the foliage will turn red. So it has fall interest. So this Plumbago gets to be, it's very short because it is a ground cover. You can see here, deer resistant. I can vouch for that. They do not touch them in my garden. They're drought tolerant, which is great because I have them planted under some trees and there's a lot of root competition there, which means that it could be pretty dry shade. They get to be 6 to 8 inches in height and they need 18-inch spacing, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And they bloom early summer through fall. So if you're looking for a perennial ground cover that will provide some fall interest, Plumbago is a good choice. Some gorgeous foxglove. Now foxglove is also known as digitalis. Most varieties are a biennial, which means that they will work on foliage and root development in year 1, and you'll get these beautiful bloom stalks in year 2. But this variety here is listed as a perennial, which is great. So this is the Camelot variety, I believe, because I did see a tag here that listed it as Camelot. And this is one of the few varieties that are perennial and should return each year. Now, they have these large bell-shaped blooms that the pollinators absolutely love. They zoom in and out of these blooms all day long, feeding on the nectar. But something that you should be aware of is that foxgloves are toxic. So if you have pets or small children that frequent your garden, something to be aware of. But they are a really beautiful tall spike type plant, look gorgeous in a cottage garden setting, and they can handle sun and part sun. So here is the specs on this one. They attract hummingbirds. They sure do. Bumblebees and hummingbirds love these. It's listed as a part sun plant. They're deer resistant, and because they are toxic, not much touches them, including deer and rabbit. And they get to be 24 to 48 inches in height and need 18 to 24 inch spacing, hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And this variety blooms late spring through mid-summer. Friends, here is a perennial that I have absolutely fallen in love with over the last couple of seasons. The pollinators also love it. You can see that there are bees all over it. This is Agastache, also known as hyssop, and it provides that beautiful vertical interest in the garden with this spike type bloom. And this blooms later in the summer, which if you're missing the structure in your garden from the salvias and the nepidas with this purple color and that spike habit, this is a great plant to add for later summer interest heading into the fall. Now they come in several varieties. Mostly they're in shades of blue and purple, which blue is just another shade of purple in the garden. But you can see that even after they're done blooming, blooming, the calyxes that hold on to the blooms are purple. So it still looks like there is some color on this plant long after some of the blooms have faded. Now this variety here is known as Bee-licious Agastache. It has a mounded habit. I would say it has more of a spike habit. It is deer resistant, so they do not touch it in my garden. And I think that is part to do with the fact that it has a minty fragrance, which is also really nice because it gives you a bit of a sensory experience. It is drought tolerant, and it gets to be 14 to 16 inches in height, and it needs 12-inch spacing, hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms early to late summer. Now, the variety that I have in my garden is called Blue Fortune, and it is a bit taller. So I would say it stands at about 24 to 30 inches in height, and it has a similar color, maybe a little bit lighter purple blue, and it looks beautiful paired with golden colored flowers like Rudbeckia. They make a really great companion plant because they bloom around the same time, and they have a different shape and structure, which makes them really complementary to one another. But this one here is on sale as part of the Home Depot's 2 for $15, the Anise Hyssop Bee-licious. And grasses. Now these are beautiful as we head into the fall because grasses offer a lot of movement and texture. They're also a great habitat for wildlife in the winter months if you decide to leave up these blades of grass. Now this variety here is a miscanthus called Japanese silvergrass gold bar. It is perennial. This one is listed as a tall height of grass. You can see how it stands nice and upright there. Now grasses do need full sun in order for them to have this nice upright habit. If you give them a little too much shade, they will start to splay in the center and not be as upright. Now this one here says that it is deer resistant. In general, all grasses I find to be deer resistant, with the exception of something like Liriope, which is a grass-like perennial. I do think that the bunnies might snack on those. It says it's a fall bloomer. Now when we're talking about blooming on grasses, that means the plumes that they send up. And so this one here is hardy to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it gets to be 3 to 5 feet tall and 24 inches wide. Now see how it says under care, divide every 3 to 5 years? That's really important to pay attention to, because what will happen with grasses over time is that they start to develop sort of a bald spot in the center. And so you'll often see grasses that will have their blades all around, but in the middle, they won't have any grass blades coming up. That's a sign to you that it is time to divide. So you would want to dig up that clump of grass, cut it apart, and then replant those segments, leaving out that piece in the center that is no longer growing anything and has gone dead. So that is how you maintain grasses, but these provide a lot of visual interest in the landscape. This ornamental grass, the Japanese silvergrass gold bar, does have what seems to be a striping pattern on it with a bit of a creamy gold color and green. Here's another type of grass. This one is a panicum, and you can see that it has this silvery blue coloring to it. And this one has already started to bloom. Now some of them look more like plumes that are similar to the look of wheat. This one here has these very loose seed heads as their blooms. So they're all different, but this one here is just listed as a panicum, and again it is a number 3 container for $24.98. Speaking of Liriope, my store actually has a whole rack on a manager special here. They're 2 for $15. Now these, if you don't deal with bunnies, they are really pretty, and they provide this grassy-like texture, and they get these purple blooms. Now these look like they're out of bloom, but I can see one here that has a very tiny little purple bloom. Almost looks very much like muscari, which is a bloom you'll see in the spring, grown from a bulb. But you can see the color of these is really pretty. It's got this variegated yellow and green foliage, almost looks like a spider plant, but they also come in a solid green variety. Now these look very impactful, planted in a large mass, okay? And they are, like I said, something that is very cool to provide a lot of texture. But you just have to be careful. If you deal with rabbits, at least in my experience, they tend to want to nibble on these. I had a drift of these planted. The rabbits kept eating them. They looked unsightly, so I ended up passing them along. And now I grow something called Echibeckia sweet flag, which has this same variegated look, golden foliage, grass-like texture, and nothing seems to touch them. And the Echibeckia in my garden is actually evergreen, so it stays all year round, where this Liriope will die back and then reflush out out in the spring once the winter is over. So again, these are a #1 container and they are on a special. Instead of $9.98 each, they would be 2 for $15. And here's yet one more variety of ornamental grass. Now this one is a little bit more compact than the others we have looked at, and it looks very similar to the Hamlin, but the Hamlin gets only to be 20 to 24 inches tall and wide, where this one is called the Foxtrot fountain grass. Now fountain grasses have a little bit different shape where they look like they're growing in a fountain shape. You can see that by the photo here. Okay, they are also deer resistant. They have attractive foliage, an arching habit. They like full sun, and they are perennial. And this variety, the Foxtrot, gets to be 36 to 48 inches in height and will spread 24 to 36 inches. Hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and it sends up these plumes in mid to late summer. I have the Hamlin variety as well as one called Little Bunny, and it has already sent up its plumes and is looking really pretty paired with sedums as we get into the later part of summer. Speaking of sedums, look at these beautiful sedum heads right here. These blooms are so large. Now this looks like the Autumn Joy, even though I did not find a tag on them. And they are in their large #3 containers for $19.98. Now sedum is super easy to divide. If you're in the process of planting one of these out and one of these stems happens to snap off, just shove it in the soil. It will begin to root, and then you will have a whole other plant. Here's yet one more variety of sedum, and it's on sale 2 for $15. It's in the #1 container. You can see how pretty the foliage on sedum is even before those bloom heads start to emerge. Now this one is still mostly foliage. This one here has started to push up its blooms. And I really like these because I think that they provide really beautiful texture. And you can see how thick the stems are, which means they hold on to a good deal of water. So they're pretty drought tolerant as well. So this variety here is the Stonecrop Abbey Door. It's a sedum hybrid. You can see those really pretty pink blooms, has a clumping habit, attracts butterflies, and is a decorative ground cover because as they spread, they will cover more of your ground, which means that they become ground cover. And that means it will also prevent some weeds, right? Because if you have plants planted, there's less space for weeds to grow. And it blooms late summer through fall, gets to be 16 inches in height, and spreads 10 to 15 inches in width. And sedums are also very hardy. This one here down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. It does tell you likes well-drained soil, and you want to keep them watered until they establish. And if you happen to garden in more shade, they also have some pretty varieties of Hosta. Now this one has a really gorgeous, kind of a chartreuse, limey colored foliage. It doesn't tell me the name. It's just listed as Hosta. Let's see if there's a label on the container. Yeah, I don't see one. But Hosta in general do like shade gardens. They can handle anywhere from about up to 4 hours of sun, typically morning sun, which is less harsh than afternoon sun. It's a great way to provide a lot of color to a shady spot in the garden through use of foliage. They typically come in lots of different shades of green and cream and yellow, and they also have lots of different patterns. So this one here says attractive foliage, brightens shade gardens, and they're also very hardy, down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. This variety says that it blooms early to midsummer, and Hosta do bloom. They will send up some bloom stalks with bell-shaped flowers that the pollinators really like, but you can cut them off down to the end of the stem if you prefer to just grow them for the mounded foliage. But they're also pretty drought-tolerant plants. The only downside I find with Hosta is that they are not deer-resistant. So deer will munch on them like deer salad. So if you deal with deer in your garden, something to be aware of. Here are some examples of some Hosta blooms. This one has sent up some bloom stalks that are getting ready to open. And if you did not like the look of them, all you have to do is follow this stem down to the base and just cut it off. And some more fall blooming perennials. We have Helenium. Now this looks to be a more compact, shorter, and mounded variety. Some of them can get quite tall, which can also make them more prone to flopping. But you can see that they have these dainty blooms. They almost look like a version of a mum, and they come in these sunset colors as well, with the burgundy and oranges and even some yellow. And here's the information on these. They're called the Helenium Heyday Red, and they are great for fall color, adds a finishing touch to the garden and an upright growth habit. They are listed as $9.98, but they are also on sale 2 for $15 here at my store. They bloom early summer through fall, and this variety gets to be 14 to 18 inches in height and needs 8 to 12 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It prefers a moist, well-drained soil. And a newer shrub by proven winners as of the last couple of seasons is this center stage crepe myrtle. Now, what's exciting about this is that typically crepe myrtles are grown as trees in warmer regions or in southern areas. And they bloom in mid to late summer. And typically trees that bloom or flower only do so in spring. So it's very rare that you get some later season flowering trees like the crepe myrtle. But here in our colder areas, we haven't typically been able to grow them. But this center stage crepe myrtle shrub by proven winners is hardy in a zone 6B through 10 or down to negative 5 degrees Fahrenheit. It gets to be 6 to 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide, which means you can grow this either as a large shrub or over time you can begin to limb it up into a small tree. And it does say that it wants 6+ hours of sun per day, has colorful foliage, and is disease resistant. And it even has another level of interest with this really pretty dark foliage. And it looks like the stems are red, and then this variety, the center stage pink, has these deep rosy colored flowers. There are tons of buds on here, so it's about to crack open into full bloom. And it also comes in center stage coral and center stage red. But you can see how beautiful this looks with these rosy blooms and dark foliage. And these are in a number 2 container for $29.98. Another gorgeous late season perennial, the allium. Now, alliums can be grown as bulbs that you plant in the fall and bloom in the spring, or this clumping perennial version that will bloom in mid to late summer. They come in several varieties. There is the Millennium, the Serendipity by proven winners, and some others. But this one here is a proven winners variety, and you can see that it has this grassy-like texture and these sphere or ball-shaped type blooms. Now, this one is just starting to open up, but as they open, the blooms get to look like this. They are beautiful. This one looks a little bit lighter pink, almost looks like the Summer Beauty allium, which I just got a division from a friend and planted in my garden, and I absolutely love it. I'm up to about 3 varieties of these alliums now because they are so pretty for late season color. The shape of them is unique, but also because they are part of the onion family and known as ornamental onion, the deer and rabbit stay away from them. They do not like the fragrance. Now, I will tell you, as a human, when I'm standing here, they do not smell like onions, but if you were to divide them or cut the foliage, you get a very faint smell of onion, but nothing that is bothersome, and it is absolutely gorgeous. These Home Depot brand containers are a number 3 size for $19.98. This variety is the Millennium. It gets to be 12 to 15 inches in height and needs 12 to 15 inch spacing. It says to water when dry, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms mid to late summer. Now, you can see how large these containers are, and this is something I do all the time. When I purchase a plant that is large like this, that I've made an investment in, I paid $20 for this container, I am going to divide it right out of the container. And these are super easy to divide. They're very much like daylilies. You just take some kind of saw or garden knife, a hori-hori, even an old bread knife will work. You cut it into segments and then plant those out. You want to keep divided plants well watered until they start establishing some new roots, but it's a great way to stretch that gardening budget. And like I said, these do really well divided. Another late season bloomer in my garden is the hardy hibiscus. Now, these grow as large as a shrub, but they are a perennial. And this is a new variety this year. It's the Summerific Cookies and Cream Hibiscus. It has a really large dinner plate sized white bloom. They are very tropical looking, so they look really great planted somewhere near a patio or even a poolside. And this variety gets to be 42 to 48 inches in size, and it needs 42 to 48 inch spacing. So mine does get a solid 4 to 5 feet tall and wide, larger with time. Mine is about 5 years now. It is loaded with blooms. I have the perfect storm, hardy hibiscus, looking gorgeous. They're very hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, these are always late, but worth the wait in my garden. So they break dormancy at some point in mid to late May, and they bloom for me at some point in mid to late August. And so if you purchase one of these this year, you plant them out, and next spring you don't see them breaking dormancy or pushing through the soil, you start to get worried. Don't worry, they are usually a little bit late to show up in spring. So these here are in a number 3 container for the hibiscus, and it is $24.98. Now this summerific cookies and cream also has this dark foliage like some of the other varieties. So my Perfect Storm also has dark foliage. And so even after all of the blooms have faded, you will have this dark foliage that will then provide some more interest in the garden, and it even gets a little bit of fall color. So I absolutely love these. And because they get so large, you only need one to make an impact. Hardy hibiscus do best grown in full sun, and they like a moist, well-draining soil. They're part of the mallow family, so they actually do well with some moisture in the soil. They also happen to have the summerific Perfect Storm, which is the one that I grow in my garden, and look how gorgeous that is. It's like a light pink and a little bit darker pink swirl with a deep red center. I love it. And here is another really gorgeous Sedum by Proven Winners. This is one of my favorites. If you recall, and you've been around for a while watching these videos, a couple of seasons ago, I bought 3 in a 4-inch container, and this year they have more than doubled in size. It is the Rock and Grow Coral Jade Sedum by Proven Winners. They like full sun, like all sedums, and this variety is nice, short, and bushy. It gets a mounded growth habit. It gets to be 16 to 18 inches in height, but it needs 28 to 30 inch spacing, and it is hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, so in zones 3 through 9. And look how beautiful it is. It is loaded with these rosettes of these coral blooms. This one has already started to color up. Look at that. It is beautiful. It has more of a deeper green foliage with red stems. You can kind of see that there. And then this color. Now, these tags from Proven Winners, if you look at the bottom, if you're new to gardening and you're not sure what to layer your plants with or what to pair them with, it does give you some suggestions. Pair with switchgrass, fountain grass, some butterfly bush, lavender, catmint, coneflower, and Russian sage. Many of those are late season bloomers. So if you want to keep your garden blooming from spring through fall, it's really great to kind of do some succession planting so that you always have something looking beautiful in your perennial garden. And sedums and grasses are great for that late season interest. These are in a number 3 container for $24.98. Coneflowers and Rudbeckia. Now, coneflowers are one of my favorites, and Rudbeckia is getting there for the late season color it provides. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't always love this golden color because yellow in the garden hasn't been my favorite. But I've really come to love these in the last couple of seasons, especially paired with some hyssop or Agastache like the one that I showed you earlier in this video. I'm going to show you a comparison of them side by side and how beautiful they look as a pairing. Now, I have the Goldstrom variety in my garden, which is wonderful. It's nice and upright, does not require any staking, has really large blooms, and it blooms for a long time. In my Zone 6B 7A garden, it starts blooming in about mid-July, and it is still blooming in mid-August and will persist until probably the very beginning of September before they start to fade. And look at these blooms. They're also known as black-eyed Susans, and I don't know why, because they definitely have more of a brown eye, but a really pretty plant. Some varieties are also susceptible to something called leaf spot, but this one looks nice and healthy. These are also in the 3-gallon containers by Home Depot, and this variety is known as the Gold Blitz Rudbeckia. It is a type of Fulgida variety, and it gets to be 24 to 28 inches in height and needs 14 to 18 inch spacing. These are also very drought tolerant. You want to water them when they're dry, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms early summer through fall. Now, with all perennials that you plant, whether they're drought tolerant or not, when you newly plant something, you do have to make sure to keep after watering it and caring for it until it starts to establish in your garden. And then after a couple of seasons, they're typically considered more drought tolerant. And can handle a little bit longer between water. But look at these beautiful coneflowers. These are gorgeous. I absolutely love them. These large cones provide a lot of interest, and even after these blooms have faded, you can leave these up to provide food for wildlife. Birds, specifically goldfinches, really love to snack on the seeds of coneflowers. Provide a lot of winter interest, and as you can see, the bees also love them. So a great pollinator attracting plant. Now this variety is, let's see, Artisan Red Ombre Echinacea. These are $19.98 for a 3-gallon container, and this variety, like most of the coneflowers, gets to be 24 to 32 inches in height and needs 30-inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. They bloom midsummer through fall. Now, the variety of coneflower that I find to get the tallest is the Echinacea purpurea, or the native variety of coneflower, which is the purple variety that you see. It's like a light purple pink. Now these do like a well-draining soil. If you have coneflowers planted in too much moisture, they will be susceptible to rot at the crown, and then you might not get your plant to return the following season. So don't give it a lot of water. You want to make sure it's in a well-draining area in full sun, and also the bunnies like to snack on them. So if you deal with bunnies, you might want to spray a repellent to keep them away. And if you wanted to grow roses, but you've been afraid to because they're known as a bit of a diva, the knockout rose is the one for you. This is a tough as nails landscape shrub rose. It's very disease resistant and such easy care. It's a pretty much set it and forget it rose. The only thing I do to mine is I prune them in very late winter and fertilize them with a granular rose fertilizer like the Espoma Rose Tone. And they perform beautifully for me all the way from very late May, early June until I get my first hard frost at the end of October. They come in several different colors. The traditional red, I have the double pink, which I happen to love. I have them planted all up and down my walkway, and they make a really beautiful impact in a large drift. They also come in the orange and coral varieties, as well as a yellow that fades to white. So lots to choose from. And here they happen to have the 2-gallon size listed for $24.98, and the 1-gallon container is $16.98. Here are the specs on the knockout rose. This one here happens to be the pink double knockout, but they pretty much grow in the same growing zones as well as grow relatively the same size. So these here need full sun. They grow in zones 5 through 11, and they get to be 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. And one of my favorite Spirea is the double play candy corn Spirea, because it has this really beautiful chartreuse and yellow foliage. The new growth comes out with this red coloring, and it also goes for a really long time. So it will emerge probably in late February, early March with red foliage. Then it goes orange before starting to turn shades of chartreuse green, and finally ending in a golden yellow color. All of the new growth will have red tips, and it gets these clusters of really pretty pink blooms for me in my garden around June, and the pollinators love them. So this is the Candy Corn Spirea by Proven Winners. You can see that is what it looks like in the landscape. All of that different color variation on the foliage. And it is also a more compact variety of Spirea. Now, I will tell you, I've had mine for about 3 to 4 years now, and the size that's listed here as 1.5 to 2.5 feet tall and wide, I want to say that it gets closer to about 2.5 to 3 feet tall and wide. It is hardy in zones 4 through 7, or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and has colorful foliage. It likes sun and part shade. Now, I have one that is in part sun, and it does really well. And then I have one that gets more sun, and the foliage can get a little bit crispy. So I would say that these probably do better in a part sun, part shade situation. And they definitely like a moist but well-draining soil. This one here is in a number 2 container for $29.98. And a dwarf variety of butterfly bush, or buddleia. This is the Pugster variety by Proven Winners, and you can see that it has these really pretty purple blooms. This variety is, it looks like the periwinkle. Yes, the Pugster periwinkle. They also come in Pugster blue and Pugster white, and it is a dwarf or more compact variety of the butterfly bush, which tends to get pretty large. And it is hardy in zones 5 through 9, or down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. This variety is listed to get 2 feet tall and wide. It is fragrant. To me, these blooms smell like lilacs, and they are long blooming, summer through fall. These, like the hibiscus, are also a little bit late to break dormancy. I usually see the foliage come through at about mid to late May, but then they bloom nonstop until you get your first hard frost. There are always tons of buds on them, and bloom buds coming up right behind the ones that are blooming. So you can see right there, there's some more forming, and right here. And all you have to do once in a while is just go through and deadhead some of these old blooms to keep the plant pushing out some new buds. but this is also a really pretty shrub for the landscape. They do like full sun and a very well draining soil. I actually lost mine because it was planted in a bed that retains too much moisture. So they do not like to be in wet soil, and sometimes they're a little bit sensitive to really cold winters. So they definitely are a little bit more temperate, but this variety is great for a more compact dwarf variety, the Pugster. And these are number 2 containers for $29.98. Well, friends, the mums have arrived, but my suggestion would be to wait until August is over and wait until September before you purchase any mums. Otherwise, you are going to be watering these constantly to keep them alive through these last few hot days of summer, because these love moisture. When you do decide to buy your mums, you want to make sure that you buy them in tight bud form like this, okay? Like this is even better, because they don't last very long. In my experience, these are only okay for a month, if you're lucky 2, before they start to fade. The best thing to do would be to take them out of these containers that they come in and plant them into a larger planter with more soil, which means it will retain more moisture and they'll be a bit happier. But if you do decide to buy some mums, again, remember to buy them in tight bud form and keep them watered. When you take them home, you want to take this container, sit it in a bucket or tray of water to let them sop up as much water as possible, and then keep them watered after that. And you'll get a little bit longer out of them. If you want to gauge the price on mums so that when you get ready to do your containers, here at the Home Depot, the 6.5-inch container is $4.98. The 8-inch container is $6.98, and the 1-quart mums are $2.98. Some more beautiful annuals for your fall refreshes on your containers. They have these ornamental kales and cabbages, some coleus, as well as celosia. If you want to keep your coleus going for a bit longer before it starts to get leggy, you see these blooms that they want to push out, you want to pinch off those blooms. You don't want to let the plant go to bloom, because then it gets quite leggy. So just like that, you just go to it and you pinch off the bloom. Here's a really pretty celosia that I actually grew last year. It's the Dragon's Breath, and it has this really pretty dark foliage with these deep pink reddish blooms and stems. This is in a 13-inch decorative planter for $22.98. The 6-inch containers of the decorative fall annuals are $3.98. So you can see they have those decorative kales and some celosia. This one is a red variety, and they also have this really pretty purple variety, which I've grown from seed before. I believe it's the Asian Garden. But lots of options for your fall containers. This is also a really pretty coleus. These are $4.98, and this is by Vigoro. And if you love these drop and decorate containers, they also have some fall ones with celosia, decorative peppers, decorative kales and cabbages, marigolds, and even mums. These fit into about a 12-inch container, the 10-inch one. So anywhere from a 10 to 12-inch planter you can drop these into, and they're $16.98. Look at that one with the decorative kale. These get even more vibrant as the temperatures get cooler. They get even more bright purple. This looks like a polka dot plant, and some decorative peppers. And they even have this one here with some caladiums. And the gorgeous purple fountain grass, also known as Sedum rubrum. Now, when I was a newer gardener, I purchased this to plant out in my landscape, and I thought that it would come back the next year as perennial, and I was pretty bummed to find that it didn't. These are only annuals, but they looked absolutely stunning planted in containers. I actually use these every year as a centerpiece in some of my seasonal planters, and they're beautiful. As the season goes on, they're going to push out these gorgeous purple plumes and just look really beautiful. These here are the Vigoro containers, number 1 size, for $10.98. I'm also a big fan of using perennials in your seasonal containers, because once you're done with them, you can use them out in the landscape. Specifically, coral bells or Heuchera do really well for me in containers. In fact, I'm willing to say that they do a lot better for me in containers than they do in the landscape, because in the landscape, they tend to get a little bit smaller each year, which is kind of a bummer. They have 3 beautiful varieties here at my store. This one here is the Carnival Rose Granita, and it has more of a deep red coloring. Then this one here has a bit of an orange hint to it, and it is the Carnival variety. And this one has more of a kind of a red underside with a bit of a variegated multicolored top, and it is the Carnival Fall Festival. Now all of these grow in a mounded habit. They have attractive foliage. They do bloom. They'll send up some bloom stalks at some point throughout the season that look like baby's breath. I think they're pretty. The pollinators love them, but if you don't like them, you can just follow the stem down and cut them at the base of the foliage, and they bloom early to late spring. They get to be 10 to 12 inches in height and need 14 to 16 inch spacing. Hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And in my experience, they do better in a part sun, part shade location. If they get a little bit too much sun, sometimes the foliage can scorch. But such a beautiful, vibrant color to use either in the landscape, in a part shade, part sun location, or in a container for the fall. Some more beautiful cone flowers. So here they have a couple of different varieties. This pink one here, which is very similar to the Echinacea purpurea, is called the Prairie Splendor Deep Rose. And it gets to be, let's see, blooms early summer through mid-fall, plant in full sun, adapts well to dry conditions. Well, it says moist conditions as well, but they definitely want a well-draining soil, and grows to be 22 to 24 inches in height and in width. Hardy down to a zone 3, so very hardy, zones 3 through 9, down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And right beside it is some of the double scoop varieties. Look how pretty these are. I actually have this one in my garden. It is the double scoop raspberry, and it is very beautiful. So the double scoop raspberry attracts butterflies, drought tolerant and upright growth habit. Gets to be 28 to 30 inches in height and 24 to 28 inch spacing. Hardy to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. I really love these double scoop varieties. They have this puffy bloom at the top with the petals that kind of hang below. And they start off a pretty bright color, and then they start to fade as they age. Some lavender, and it smells so lovely over here. Now lavender, butterflies and pollinators love them. They have a really nice and soothing fragrance, and most of them have sort of like a bluish gray foliage color. You can cut these and make little satchels. Oh, I just love the smell of lavender. And this one is known as Grosso. Now they do like full sun and very well draining soil. If lavender gets too much moisture, they can rot at the crown and then you'll lose your plant. But otherwise they are a beautiful plant. And the thing is with lavender, they are a Mediterranean origin plant, which means that they do like that sandy, dry soil. They also have some of the Camelot Rose Foxglove, which is a really beautiful deep rose pink color. And there is the specs on this one. Attracts hummingbirds, upright growth habit, deer resistant, and gets to be 42 to 48 inches in height, 24 to 30 inches in width. Hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And another fall bloomer, the Aster. I actually grew some of these in a container last year along with some Heuchera, and it returned for me this year. It gets these little button type light purple blooms with a yellow center as it continues to open up. And this one here is called the Aster Dragon. And it's a perennial, deer resistant, attracts butterflies, has a clumping growth habit. You can see there the yellow center. And they like full sun, blooms late summer through fall. Height is 24 to 36 inches, and it needs 18 to 24 inch spacing. Hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Some Autumn Joy Sedum in the number 2 container for $14.98. Such beautiful, large, shiny leaves. They hold on to water beautifully. Look at that. And so many blooms getting ready to open. They do like full sun. This is the Autumn Joy variety, which is deer resistant and drought tolerant. Gets to be 16 to 24 inches in height and needs 15 to 18 inch spacing. Hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy. And yet another variety of sedum in the 2 for $15 number 1 size container at the Home Depot. This one is called Autumn Fire, and it also gets really pretty pink blooms, perennial, deer resistant, drought tolerant. And this one can handle, it looks like part sun, and 24 to 30 inches in height, 18 to 24 inch spacing, and hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoors also starting to receive some evergreens for fall planting. Fall is actually the perfect time to plant. The temperatures are cooler, which means less stress on your plant, and we generally get more moisture, which will help the plant establish and start developing some roots before the ground freezes and winter starts. So this here is a juniper old gold. I actually have these planted along my foundation, and they are gorgeous. They get these really golden tips with more sun, and they have sort of an arching growth habit. They get to be only about 3 to 4 feet in height and about 4 to 5 feet in width. It does say 6-foot spacing, so over time it can continue to grow. Most of the size that you will see on plant tags is for a 10-year growth rate. So if the plant is happy, it will continue to grow beyond that size over time. The junipers are generally deer resistant and drought tolerant. They don't need as much moisture as something like an arborvitae, which does like consistent moisture. And these are in a number 1 container for $16.98. And another favorite in my garden is the blue star juniper. This is a really low growing mounding type conifer. It is great for the front of the border. It does not get very tall. Mine have been in my garden for about 12 years now, and they are full grown at about 3 by 4 in diameter. And they only get to be about 18 inches in height or so. They do love full sun in order to have this vibrant silvery blue coloring. And they are deer resistant, also drought tolerant once established. The blue star juniper says that it needs 36 to 48 inch spacing, and it is hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $16.98. I also love these smaller containers because not only are they more affordable, but the root ball is smaller, which makes them a lot easier to plant. And if you're looking to plant a living fence or privacy hedge this fall, the green giant arborvitae is a great option. But you do have to have the space for them because the green giant, like the name suggests, can get pretty giant. They get upwards of 25 to 30 feet in height and about 15 feet or so in width. They grow relatively fast, which is great if you want to create privacy quickly. And I do have a video on my channel that goes over the key differences between the green giant arborvitae and the emerald green variety. I will link that video down below if you are looking to create a privacy fence and are starting to research the type of arborvitae that you'd like to use. But these here at the Home Depot are in a number 3 container for $34.98. They also have the larger number 7 containers for $59.98 of the green giant arborvitae. And another upright evergreen. This is an ilex, also known as a holly, and it is by proven winners. It's called the Castle Rouge, and it is $29.98. Now, there aren't spec cards in these containers, but my guess is that these are going to grow in a pyramidal shape based on the growth habit of them in the container now. But hollies are a great addition for that winter landscape. If you live in an area that you get snow or cold winters, when most of your perennials die back, having evergreen interest is wonderful in the garden because you'll still have something out there to look at during those winter months. And these are in a number 2 container for $29.98. The Castle Rouge holly is actually new in garden centers this year. It gets to be 5 to 8 feet in height, 4 to 5 feet in width. It likes sun to part sun, and it is hardy in zones 5 through 7. Well, that brings us to the end of the August inventory here at the Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.